The word vandalism actually came from these guys, because they kept coming up into Rome and disrupting them, and so that we get the word vandalism from that tribe, the Vandals. Eventually they became extinct. They didn't exist anymore. But anyway, just a little English word trivia. So they became what you and I would know of as modern-day Europe. You can kind of know that the Visigoths, they became the Spanish, the Sueves were the Portuguese, the Herula became Italy, the Franks became the French, the Anglo-Saxons up there in English. You get the point. Here's what the Bible predicts. All the way in 606 BC, while King Nebuchadnezzar was at rule, he said that Europe will become divided and never unite again as one global power. Is that fascinating to you? Here's something interesting. The efforts have been made by Charlemagne, Charles V, Louis XIV, Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, and even Hitler. Incidentally, Napoleon, when he was finally conquered and he was put out to exile at the Isle of Elba, they claim, he said that God himself is too much for me. It is impossible to unite Europe again. Now check this out. In April, I volunteer for an organization. We're a domestic organization, but we have an international audience. So we've been looking at all these groups over in Europe. They're meeting, they're young people, they're excited about the Bible, and we thought to ourselves, you know what, we should sort of bring this group together and let them do something on a more global scale in Europe. Interestingly enough, we go over, in April we had a meeting, there were 14, how many? 14 countries represented in a room about this size. And we were all spread out, and we started talking about this is what we want to do. We can sort of attack Europe, not attack in a feisty sense, but we can bring and unite the young people together in Europe. We can do this, we can do that. And soon discussion happened around the room. And soon they weren't getting along. And I knew them all pretty well on an individual basis, so I grabbed my English friend from England, and we went over to the side, and I said, why can't you just get along? He said, well, here's the problem. The Dutch, they just want to rush in and not plan anything. The Germans want to overanalyze everything, and then we'll never get anything. They just need to see things my way. And so I said, well, can we just move ahead? Is there any realistic way that you're going to get along? He said, yeah, if they see things my way. You get the other people, you ask the Germans, you ask the Dutch, they can't get along. And I said, is there any possible way for this? What is going on here? And he said, he said in a joking way, you're probably seeing the feat of iron and clay being enacted right in front of you. And it was a little bit humorous, but indeed it's true. People are trying to unite Europe. There's this European Union where other countries wouldn't secede to the Union. You have German that they even met this week to think if they wanted to get out. I don't know what the outcome of that was. But they can't get along. And here's the reality. They never will. No matter what. If they do, you can take your Bible, place it beside Hamlet or whatever else because the Bible would be false. But it's not going to happen. These guys have tried. They tried with force through armies. It will not happen. They tried politically. It did not happen. They tried to marry each other. Countries, brothers and sisters, they became family and immediately disunited. It will not happen. So in Daniel chapter 2, we have from Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and divided Europe explained. The point is this. Daniel chapter 2 presents an accurate symbol of world history. But let's ask this question. How do we know that the book of Daniel wasn't written after things occurred, after these things occurred, and was then made to look like it was written before them? You ever had that question in your mind? How do we know? How do we know this wasn't written 28 years ago when I wasn't alive? How do we know that this Bible didn't come about maybe even 100 years ago after all this happened? There's a thing that was discovered, and let me get my dates correct so that I'm not just making this up. Some of the oldest manuscripts of the Bible discovered to date are the Dead Sea Scrolls. Incidentally, just pieces of these were up at the Science Museum not that long ago. Did anyone go see them? Yeah, a few people. We were up there. They were discovered in 1947 by an Arab shepherd boy in caves near the Dead Sea. Excavations over the next 10 years brought forth thousands of scrolls containing every Old Testament book except for Esther. Every Old Testament book except for Esther. The scrolls date back as far as 125 BC. This means that the book of Daniel was in existence at least as early as 125 BC, and almost certainly much earlier than that, since there's evidence that Jesus himself in Matthew alludes to the book of Daniel. From these facts, at the very least, we can know that the feet of iron and clay and their symbolic predictions would never be another world monarchy appeared before the fact, before it was written. The point is this. The Dead Sea Scrolls show that Daniel wasn't written after these events had passed. Amen? So we kind of took a look at some prophetic evidence. The next thing we'll look at, and the final thing we'll look at tonight, are 4 consistencies. 4 what? Consistency. Stick with me. We've looked at these bold claims that the Bible makes. We've also looked at some prophetic evidence that indeed the Bible is what it says it believes. And now we're going to look at 4 consistencies. The 4 are this. Internal. It agrees with
itself.
Itself. Stick with me. It agrees with itself. Translational. It survives through time. Cultural. It teaches, it reaches across boundaries. And experiential. It changes lives. Internal. There was 40, how many? 40 authors, 66 books, over 1,500 years, and they all span, 1,500 years span from 3 different countries. Continents. Thank you. That's why I put it up there so you can check it. 3 continents. Now let me just ask you this question. What if this? One of my favorite foods is pad thai. Anyone ever had that before? Anyone enjoy that? I mean, don't be bashful. Just throw your hands up. It's a great dish. Now let me ask you this question. What if we took 40 different chefs, we invited them into this room, and they're all different backgrounds. So we had a few ladies, we had a few men, we had a few older people, we had a few younger people, we had varying degrees of education, so maybe half of them went to culinary school and half of them did not. We invite them, maybe there's someone from Africa, someone from Europe, someone from Australia, someone from the United States. We get them in here and we say, all right, make us pad thai. How many of them would taste the same? They wouldn't. I actually had pad thai 3 times last week. 2 of them from different states. Not even close to tasting the same. Now here's my point. Many times you hear this little saying that goes that you never talk about politics and you never talk about religion. Why is that? Because there's so many varying beliefs of religion. So here's the point of the Bible. You've asked 40 authors to write 66 books over a span of 1,500 years from 3 continents, and internally it's consistent. You can't do it with pad thai, but you can do it with a book this big about a subject that's even tougher than pad thai. The book is internally consistent. The point is this. The Bible agrees with itself. Second, translational. Let me get my statistics out. So again, I'm not making these things up. Translational consistency refers to the fact that various ancient manuscripts discovered from various historical periods are in agreement with one another. Now, I wish so much the USA Today, the front page of it on Thursday, talked about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I was going to bring that and show it to you tonight, but I think I just got so nervous and the rush of getting out of here, I forgot to bring it. So maybe I'll bring it to you tomorrow so you can see it. But online now are all the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now what's the significance of that? Before the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the oldest manuscripts were from around 900 AD. 900 AD. You're tracking with me? One copy of Isaiah from the Dead Sea Scrolls, called the Giant Isaiah Scroll, was compared with one of these newer copies. So, exactly 1,000 years had elapsed from them. Yet, according to a British scholar, Sir Francis Kenyon, he said this: in one chapter, this is speaking about the whole book of Isaiah, in one chapter there is only one word, 3 letters in question. And this word does not significantly change the meaning. Did you catch the significance of that? So just to give you a little explanation, let's say that I sat down in this room and I penned out a book. I wrote a book, whatever it was about. Maybe it was about pad thai, how to make pad thai. And then it's translated into many different languages. It's printed copy after copy after copy. And then we get 1,000 years later, what do you think the two would look like? Think they'd have any similarities? Maybe a few. But the Dead Sea Scrolls says this. They wrote about Isaiah. The oldest copy we had was 900 AD. You look at a copy 1,000 years earlier, and the only difference is a word "the." The only difference, 3-letter word in question. That's the Old Testament. The New Testament. There's more than 6,000 ancient manuscript copies. There's about 98% agreement, and the only discrepancies do not materially affect the meaning of the text. Princeton professor Bruce Metzer estimates that the New Testament was copied with 99.5% accuracy. Only a God that cares about us would preserve his book that much. It is impossible. It is impossible for human beings to preserve something like that through culture. Through thousands of years, through multiple language changes, and through billions literally of printed. It is impossible for a human to have that kind of accuracy. Cultural. Experiential consistency is perhaps the most important kind. It is the reason for the Bible's popularity. This book is not just another great work of literature, not just a historical volume, not just a source of fascinating prophecy and finely tuned theologically insight. The book changes lives.
That's right.
That is to say this. Let me just track back just a second, because I want to tell you this as well. The Bible is the most printed book across the world, year after year. They've stopped including it for the bestseller list because it's always at the top. The Internet Public Library says that the cumulative sales of the Bible are probably right around 6 billion. 6 billion. The second best-selling book of all time is Mao's Little Red Book, which you and I know he forced on a lot of different people. So it was easy for that to become the second. You multiply tens of millions of copies of the Bible. It's been translated in more than 2,000 languages and dialogue and distributed around the world. Clearly, this book holds a message that cuts through the cultural class and time. That is to say this: while you and I are coming here in the United States tonight, we have questions about why does God exist? Is there any evidence? It can answer our question. At the same time, there's probably a meeting that's happening just like this in Africa. The same type of people are coming in with questions, and it answers their question. Could be in Australia, could be in Europe. It doesn't matter where they're coming in from. The fact is the Bible transcends culture. The Bible is relevant and revered cross-culturally. Now we'll move into the experiential consistency, just a little parentheses. It is perhaps, I would argue, the most important kind. Harry Orchard, he was called the dynamite killer. What was he called?
Dynamite.
The dynamite killer. Because as a hitman, he was hired by corrupt labor leaders. One time he blew up a train that was moving out of Ohio, and it killed 14 different miners. The labor leaders were opposed by Governor Steinberg of Idaho, and Orchard was hired to kill him. He stalked Steinberg, he watched his patterns, and finally he discovered a way where he could kill him. He wired a bomb to his gate, and as the governor passed through his gate one night, the bomb went off. Orchard was caught and sentenced to die. And while waiting in prison, Mrs. Steinberg sent him a